You know, every once in a while, despite it happening all the time, but every once in a while, I really hate being right. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. It's your pal Noms here, and today...
I'm afraid I've got some bad news!
So I published a video just over 2 months ago that revisited Game of Thrones Season 8 1 year after the disastrous series finale. I did some research and digging into the DVD and Blu-ray commentaries, and some behind-the-scenes featurettes to try and make sense of just what the hell happened with the final season of Game of Thrones. But most of all, I wanted some closure on the final episode of the show, because after the disastrous reception to episodes 3, 4, and 5 of Season 8, HBO decided to hide the series finale inside the episode documentary, where the showrunners Dumb and Dumber explain their moronic decisions about how they decided to end the show because HBO didn't want to get any more bad press. While I was doing my research for the video, I came across more than I bargained for, and there was a lot more that HBO had hidden than I could have predicted, including a featurette with Emilia Clarke, Kit Harington, and the actor who plays Grey Worm that translates to a different Season 8 Episode 5 than the version that aired last year. And according to Emilia Clarke herself, she was unaware of Daenerys becoming the Mad Queen. In addition to this, I discovered an article that gave a small window into the final script that showed Daenerys' motivation for committing genocide. The motivation for her doing this was written extremely vague and ambiguous for the cast members to read, which wasn't very typical for any script or screenplay. And finally, in addition to that, Daenerys was purposely absent from the remainder of the episode once she takes to the sky with Drogon, meaning her only involvement beyond what little Emilia Clarke actually acted for that sequence was done through computer-generated imagery, which likely made it very easy for the showrunners to deceive her until the post-production product was released. Just to bring you up to speed, I'm going to play some select clips from my previous video. Now, despite my disdain for the character of Daenerys, I've come to know that Emilia Clarke is a gem, a very sweet and likable actress, who has expressed a lot of humility and understanding for the fan outrage after the series finale, which is more than I can say for some. And this is where I've formulated a theory. You're all probably going to think I'm reaching with this, but here goes. When Emilia Clarke says this,
bridge, and there's the emotion, and there's the feeling, and the feeling is to fucking kill her. Sorry.
I don't think that Grey Worm can...
Did you pick up on that? She says Dany's feeling is to kill her, not kill them. And despite this, Dany doesn't even aim for Cersei. She aims for everyone else. The actress is clearly in costume, but it's not the costume of the shot she's discussing. So perhaps this is her last day on set? Who knows, but we do know it's after she shot the sequence, and she's speaking from retrospect. On the Season 8 documentary that shows the table read, it glosses over the footage of Emilia reading the script for this sequence. We see Jon and Tyrion have the same discussion in Tyrion's prison cell from the finale, and Dany's death plays out much the same.
Did she sound like someone who's done fighting? She's a conqueror. She liberated the people of Slaver's Bay. She liberated the people of King's Landing. Our queen's nature is fire and blood.
But we are left to assume that the script reads as if Dany is burning the city. However, if this article is to be believed, that's not quite the case. But now the episode's script is available to read at the Writers Guild Foundation Shavelson Web Library in Los Angeles, and it helps further explain this pivotal choice made by the Mother of Dragons. Dany sees all the people below like little ants. The script says, Lannister Red, intermingled with fleeing civilians. She has won. But she sees the Red Keep, the script continues, the castle that her family built that belongs to her, occupied by the false queen. She has come so far, and she will go further. Then the showrunners Dumb and Dumber, the writers credited for the bells, reference the final line of a Robert Frost poem, "Oh, blood will out, it cannot be contained." Now it makes me wonder why the script isn't spelled out in something akin to this. Dany and Drogon begin to rain fire down on King's Landing with its people fleeing. They are powerless, innocent or otherwise, or something like that. But instead they use a reference to this poem, and assuming they didn't do any last minute changes, and if this article is correct, then this is how the script was read at the table read. Now that poem reference reads like something you'd put into a novel, not a script. Scripts aren't meant to read like novels. It's my understanding that they are meant to say what they mean very specifically because they are governing actors and stage presence. Whereas the writing in a novel doesn't always need to explicitly say what is meant, so that it leaves some room for the audience to interpret it. But the only audience here is the cast members. They're the ones who are going to read the script. And likely not many, if any at all, will understand the context of that reference or its origin. So it's bizarre to me why they would reference a poem in their script writing for the table read. My theory is this: Dumb and Dumber placed that into the script for the table read so as not to alarm any of the actors, especially Amelia. King's Landing is sacked, but most of the blood and the carnage comes from Dany's forces, not Dany herself, which is why at the table read, Jon and Tyrion's scenes play out the same. Not only that, but here we see Dumb and Dumber say this.
We wanted her to be just death from above as seen from the perspective of the people who are on the business end of that dragon.
So to bring my theory full circle, after Dany makes her decision, Emilia Clarke is no longer on set for this sequence. Yes, she's filming that episode up till the point where she's on the dragon, meaning until she saw the full version of Season 8, after post-production, Drogon could have been ballet dancing for all she knew. The rest of the sequence on her behalf is CGI. So is it possible, in addition to not wanting to provide nuance, for her vile actions from Daenerys' perspective while she's committing these actions, Dumb and Dumber wanted to keep Amelia in the dark? Now, like I said, that's only a small portion of the video that talks about many other things concerning Season 8. It's over an hour long, but be sure to check it out at your leisure if you want some more content that discusses the series finale. And honestly, I was so sure that I was reaching with that Daenerys theory. So much so, in fact, that I almost cut it from the video itself. But it wasn't until this morning that I realized just how right I was when I came across this video from the Dragon Demands. Dragon, who collaborated with me on the very video I just mentioned, did some additional research of his own. And where I only managed to track down a snippet of the script, he actually went to the library where it was being held and he read the whole thing. And his findings are actually worse than I imagined. They don't line up perfectly with my original theory, but it does regrettably prove the theory correct to some degree. Here's a small clip from Dragon's video that gives you a summary of his findings.
That we've been planning this since Season 3. Since Season 3, we knew how the Daenerys storyline would end, therefore it's legitimate. She was always going to go crazy. Well, I've reviewed the filming script for this episode that they sent to the Writers Guild archives. The officially archived script. And it turns out that it's significantly different from the final aired version. No! They weren't planning on doing this in Season 3. They rewrote whatever they even intended by Season 7. And on top of that, when you go through this, you realize they changed this from their own filming script for Season 8. This is the script they showed the actors at the table read that they showed a few clips of. The big 2-day whole cast table read, which was in October of 2017. The version of Season 8 they saw at that table read is not the one that's in the final aired version that we saw on screen. So all of their defense that, oh, this isn't character assassination, Daenerys is always going to go crazy. Look at the montage we made at the beginning of the episode of every time Daenerys threatened a bad guy. That means she's crazy. They could have done that for Arya just as easily. Oh, you kill bad guys, therefore you're insane. That was all a desperate attempt to paper over a retcon. Their whole defense that, no, we've been planning this for years, is a lie. They weren't even planning it by the table read. Or they were, but lied to the cast about it. In the original filming script, most of the destruction of King's Landing is not directly caused by Daenerys Targaryen, but by a wildfire chain reaction, that green napalm stuff, that she accidentally sets off in the crossfire, and which then explicitly spreads out of control. This was also confirmed by the Blu-ray commentary by the VFX team for this episode, in which they outright state, this is a change. Point 2, the second main takeaway from the script, is that when you read through it, it's not so much what it says, but what it doesn't say. The actual destruction of King's Landing as described in this is incredibly short and vague, even relative to the rest of the script. Depending on how you count it, her actions, just focused on not her mental state, but what are her actions, what is it describing about Daenerys actually doing, with the dragon, depending on how you count it, it's described in about 4 or 5 sentences. And just reading it, it's unusual compared to just how much you saw in the aired episode visually, that it never specifies. Daenerys is firing on crowds of only civilians, massacring innocent women and children. It never says that.
Now, I've linked the full video in the description below. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. And I don't want to take anything away from Dragon, so I'll only briefly paraphrase him from this point onward. But I do want to discuss what all this means. So firstly, the quote that I found from the article commenting on the script wasn't mentioned in Dragon's video. The quote that I found goes, "Oh, blood will out, it cannot be contained." But I've spoken with Dragon and he has confirmed it is indeed in the final script, but he was showing us what the script detailed before and after Daenerys is in the air, not when she takes flight, which is what the quote was describing. Secondly, Dragon goes on to tell us just how vague the script is concerning the destruction of King's Landing. And this did not surprise me in the slightest, to be perfectly honest. It only confirmed my original suspicions. If anything, the script was more detailed than I gave Dumb and Dumber credit for. I honestly thought there would be next to no description of the destruction whatsoever that concerned Daenerys anyway, in order to keep her in the dark. But the way it is framed is that Daenerys was targeting Lannister soldiers, which just so happened to be in close proximity to innocent civilians, that end up being collateral damage once she begins her attack. And the innocent civilians are not what Daenerys' wrath is explicitly targeting. And this happens while Daenerys is flying to her actual target, which is Cersei Lannister and the Red Keep, which is absolutely consistent with Daenerys' character, and with what Emilia Clarke herself described Daenerys' mindset to be during this chaos.
Natural for a person to retort to anger. And so that's exactly where she goes. And it's there, it's always been there. It's what's drived her throughout everything. Here comes that familiar feeling of anger and she doesn't do anything to choke that. She lives in it. It's this feeling that you could call Targaryen craziness, you could give it all of these names that it doesn't deserve, because it is just grief. It's hurt. And she has this ability to make that hurt a little bit less just for a minute. And here she is sitting on this ridge, and there's the emotion, and there's the feeling, and the feeling is to fucking kill her. Sorry. When you feel that much failure and disappointment and shame and hurt and lost love, there's only so much pain you can handle before you snap.
She wasn't a psychopath. She was simply grief-stricken and full of rage. She didn't want to burn the city alive. She wanted to take revenge on the Lannister soldiers and the current matriarch of the Lannister family, who happens to be sitting on her family's throne in the castle that her family built and who had just killed her best friend. Also consistent with my original theory, Emilia Clarke had no idea about what Dumb and Dumber's true intentions for Daenerys' character were, because during the filming of the last 2 episodes, she had no idea what her character was actually looking at, or what her gigantic behemoth of a dragon was actually doing until she saw the final cut, and what the visual effects artist team were instructed to do. The script doesn't absolve Daenerys entirely. As I previously said, and as Dragon Demands points out, she is still responsible for the deaths of dozens of civilians. That she did indeed kill, which was simply in the crossfire. Still tragic, still horrible, still guilty. But much more relatable, understandable, and believable from the character's mindset, which was no less human than the grief and anger we can feel from the pain of loss in our own daily lives. The pain of loss can make someone hysterical, which is why there are things called counseling. There is family and friends to provide a shoulder to cry on. And there's medication to help a person deal with being hysterical over a loss. The reason why we as a society have these things in place is because hysterical people do not tend to think very clearly. They have a tendency to lash out at people, be it strangers, loved ones, and enemies. And they have a tendency not to discriminate because they are hysterical. And in Daenerys' case, this hysterical person who had no one left to answer to, and who had a dragon at her disposal, the most powerful creature in the A Song of Ice and Fire universe, she had the means, in Emilia Clarke's words, to make that grief lesser. And so she reaped her revenge at those who wronged her, with a tragic cost to innocent human life that just so happened to be in the way. If the original script was adhered to, this would explain Emilia's thoughts on Daenerys' death.
Didn't see it coming. Final scene, I did not see that coming. As
So it was brilliantly written because it reads the way that it hopefully will play, which is, what? After all of everything that she'd done in the season, I almost felt relieved.
I don't know about you guys, but if I was playing Daenerys and my character did what Daenerys actually did in the final cut, I wouldn't feel almost relieved that she was dead. I would avidly want Jon Snow to crucify and then kill my character for what she did. And if Emilia Clarke knew the extent of what Daenerys actually did at the time, I'm sure she would want that too, more or less. This would also explain why Emilia didn't see Daenerys' death coming by Jon Snow's hand. But based on what we saw in episode 5, I think we all expected it by the final episode, even if we hadn't read the leaks. And it would also explain why Jon Snow needed 20 whole frickin' minutes of convincing by Tyrion Lannister to kill Daenerys after she committed mass genocide. Because that's not how it plays out in the original script. Also consistent with my theory is Daenerys did not do the majority of damage to King's Landing herself. Not even close. As she burned her way through Lannister soldiers along the path to the Red Keep, the caches of wildfire left behind by her father begin to ignite the city. The majority of the city, in fact. Daenerys also makes a conscious effort to cut off the soldiers' means of escape, allowing them no choice but to fight Grey Worm and the Unsullied. So she still had some sense to target her dragonfire in a somewhat strategic way, but that kind of goes without saying since she managed to take out the Iron Fleet and all of the Scorpions on the King's Landing walls whilst taking no damage and doing minimal collateral damage herself. In the Blu-ray commentary, the visual effects team makes several remarks for how certain shots were essentially changed from wildfire to dragonfire.
Some wildfire. So that's where your line would have been headed. So that was supposed to be originally conceived as a wildfire shot, but that changed into not a wildfire shot.
They also state how they had to force a ludicrous level of destruction so that the way King's Landing looks in the final episode would somehow make sense to meet what Dumb and Dumber wanted.
Well, the trick here was we knew we had to get to the level of destruction that we see in the next episode, episode 6 during Dany's speech. So you had to do an inordinate amount of destruction with every fire blast. So early on we started just annihilating the buildings anywhere around like that, around the fire, so that it made some sense.
Since they were the directors helming the final episode. Even though Dumb and Dumber, when faced with a similar dilemma, had no problems just reversing the destruction without a care in the world. This is essentially what happened with Jaime and Cersei in episode 5. The director wanted them killed with a firebomb that engulfed the tunnels under the Red Keep. Whether it was wildfire or dragonfire is still up in the air, but they needed to keep the bodies of Jaime and Cersei intact to accommodate the scene Dumb and Dumber wanted where Tyrion finds his siblings both dead.
And originally we were going to send a firebomb through here that was going to burn them all to hell, and then Dave and Dan decided they wanted Tyrion to find the bodies in 6.
Yeah, that was.
They were like, you can't, you know, they can't be tainted in any way. They can't be smashed up. And I was like, well, how the bloody hell are we going to do that?
Yeah.
So we covered them in bricks.
And finally, as you can see here, there was even concept art made of this prior to the final cut. The Dragon's Demands himself mentions this in his video, as you can see here. So to summarize, was Emilia Clarke kept in the dark about the extent of Daenerys' actions? Yes, absolutely. Was Emilia Clarke lied to? Yes, absolutely. Was the script intentionally vague? Yes, absolutely. Was it intentionally misleading? Uncertain. I cannot confirm if the Mad Queen was always Dumb and Dumber's intention, or if the change was a retcon after the table read or after principal photography, and they made the changes after the fact because they changed their minds on a dime. Is the original script more consistent with the actors' takes on Season 8's finale, in the behind-the-scenes interviews? Yes, absolutely. Had these events from the original script come to pass, would it have saved Season 8? Absolutely not. There is still the travesty of the Long Night, Jon Snow's useless ending, Arya's nonsense, a horde of other character assassinations, and not to mention King Bloody Bran with the stupidest reasoning imaginable. But would the original script, had it been fulfilled, would it have been a better finale than what we got? Yes! It would have been light years better. Which says a lot when I say that, despite that, Season 8 would have been a dumpster fire. but at least it would have given the audience more to interpret and debate concerning Dany's actions, because not a soul on earth who loves this show would have condoned what she actually did in the final cut of Season 8. The character would have still been true to herself to some degree, making the moral grounds behind her death actually questionable, meaning the audience would have likely still thought she deserved to die, because a lot of innocent people still died because of her, but the audience wouldn't have been completely disgusted with her to the point of praying for her death as soon as possible by the end of the show. This would have again opened up discussion for the audience about the ethics of Jon Snow and Tyrion conspiring against her, and it would make so much more sense for why Jon was hesitant to kill her and why Tyrion had to actively try to convince him that Daenerys went too far, despite the vast majority of damage not being her intent, as the original script detailed. This is medieval Westeros, and this is war. Innocents dying in war is tragic as we know, but it is also the way of that world, and Daenerys' collateral damage of civilians perhaps could have been seen as a regrettable means to an end by the characters themselves, instead of the characters debating if an evil, psychopathic, genocidal monster deserves to die for the worst crime in Westerosian history. Like, the final episode plays out as if this is the greatest moral dilemma of the show. Will Jon Snow kill Daenerys Targaryen? And can he kill the woman he loves? Note that I'm using the word loves very charitably here. When in context with Season 8 Episode 5, this is nonsense, even without the leaks. I would be very surprised if anyone thought Jon wasn't going to kill her once he reached the Red Keep for their final confrontation. I was just wondering why the hell it took him so long in the first place, because there's nothing left to interpret here. However, if Dany's actions were somewhat more morally justified and less horrific, as described in the original script, then there would be plenty left to interpret. How Jon Snow actually feels about the matter and Dany's actions, as well as her potential future as a ruler and how much of a liability she is for the good of the realm. Kit Harington himself has said that Jon didn't know he was going to kill Daenerys until she says this.
What about everyone else?
They don't get to choose.
He doesn't know he's going to betray her until right at the end. And at that point in Jon's head, it's a number of things. It's number one, don't factor in anyone else's decision. And also, that means you're going to kill my sisters. So it becomes family versus her. And that's ultimately why Jon does what he does.
Because he realizes that Daenerys will kill his sisters if he doesn't act. And so he kills her, regrettably and questionably in the eyes of both the audience and the characters, to save his sisters. As opposed to the audience thinking this is absolutely retarded and praying for the end, because Daenerys Targaryen, after committing mass genocide, cannot be defended in any way, shape, or form. Ultimately, the character of Daenerys Targaryen, the actress of Daenerys Targaryen, and the fans of Daenerys Targaryen were done a massive disservice. But now we know it wasn't just narratively, but ethically as well. Dumb and Dumber teased the cast with a more justifiable script that they then altered for the purposes of shock value, almost as if it was to spite the character and the fans of the show. They butchered this character they didn't even create, that was adored and idolized by millions, and lied to the actress who had been enthusiastic and loyal to the show for close to a decade. To Dumb and Dumber, I've only one thing left to say: go fuck yourselves. And to Emilia Clarke, I want to say thank you for actually sympathizing with the fans instead of misrepresenting them like the media and some of the other cast members of the show. I firmly believe no one was more upset with how Daenerys was handled more than you. Anyway, that's all I have to say on the matter. Gotta say, I really didn't expect to be right about my theory. Even though it wasn't entirely correct, I'm still honestly sad that I was. But at the same time, I don't know why I'm surprised, given what we know about the showrunners. I swear, it just never ends with these two, and I really gotta stop giving them the benefit of the doubt. With all that said though, while I have your attention, here's some other content you may be interested in. First, don't forget to subscribe to The Dragon Demands. He's got a lengthy video coming out about this very topic, and he has much more insight on the topic than I do. Check out his videos, you won't be disappointed, and you'll learn a great deal. Also, if you want more videos on Game of Thrones Season 8, I have made a playlist of all of the videos I have made on the matter. Be sure to check them out as well. Also, I recently made a video ranting about what George R.R. Martin himself said on the matter of Game of Thrones Season 8. The creative differences and disagreements he had with the final product. I have no doubt several of you will be interested in that as well. And lastly, over the past few months, I have been covering Game of Thrones Season 8 in vivid detail on a podcast I host weekly. We go through every episode of Season 8 scene by scene, frame by frame with the audio commentaries. playing throughout. These podcasts are long, but they are also very in-depth, so if you'd like some insight into Season 8, which will likely answer many of your misconceptions and questions which weren't answered by Dumb and Dumber, check out the podcast episodes on Season 8 of Game of Thrones. I've taken the liberty of making a playlist for you. We have so far covered Game of Thrones Season 8 episodes 1, 2, 3, and 4, but we have yet to cover episode 5 and 6, and those will be covered in the coming weeks or months, but they will be done in time, rest assured. Now finally, I want to give you a short outro as I wrap this video up. I'd like to give a shout out and thank you to all of my patrons. Thank you for all your contributions to the channel and for your support. I greatly appreciate it. If you'd like to support the channel with a monthly donation, even if it's just $1 per month, the link for Patreon is in the description. Also, a big thank you to my YouTube members. Thank you to the Star Killers, the Captain Prices, and the Master Chiefs for all of your support and contributions to the channel as well. It means a lot, and I will try to do my best to be worth your generosity. If you'd like to become a member of the channel, click the join button below. Also, if you haven't already, please check out the channel's Discord server. Discord is basically an online community where followers of this channel can go to congregate and discuss a range of different topics, ranging from Marvel to Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, and so on. I hope to see you there, and who knows, maybe you'll make some friends along the way. I have a second channel called AI Gaming, so feel free to head over there if you want some additional content that pertains to video games, gaming news, streams, etc. Finally, if you were looking for some classy new threads, be sure to check out the channel's merchandise store, if you want to look as fly as possible and support the channel at the same time. But if you've been following the channel for long enough, you may find some memes to your liking as well. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks for staying till the end of the video. You are a legend, and I'll see you next time.